Wherever you are, I hope you are comfortable, settled into a quiet space, perhaps lying down or resting in the soft glow of your room. Allow yourself to take a slow, deep breath and let it settle your mind. Tonight, we will drift together into a forest, not just of trees, but of secrets, of whispers, and of connections that reach far beneath the soil. We are about to explore the silent, intricate networks that allow trees to remember, to communicate, and to thrive together in ways that resemble intelligence, yet remain profoundly quiet and patient. When we walk through a forest, the first thing we notice is the air, the smell of moss and damp earth, the subtle fragrance of pine or oak, the gentle creak of branches swaying above. Sunlight filters in golden beams, catching motes of dust and giving the leaves a soft, almost ethereal glow. To our eyes, each tree appears solitary, rooted in its own spot, standing alone in its quiet majesty. Yet beneath our feet, beneath the layer of soil that seems so inert, a vast, hidden world unfolds. A world where roots stretch, meet, and entwine, where microscopic fungi build bridges that allow entire communities of trees to communicate, where memory is not stored in neurons, but in chemical signals, in shared networks, in the subtle flow of nutrients that travel in silence from one organism to another. Scientists have come to call this hidden web the Wood Wide Web, a play on words that evokes the internet, yet belongs entirely to the natural world. It is composed of roots, yes, but also of mycorrhizal fungi, tiny threads that infiltrate the soil and attach themselves to the roots of trees. These fungi, in their countless filaments, form a mesh so delicate that it can only be seen under a microscope, yet so resilient that it stretches across entire forests, linking tree to tree in what could be described as a subterranean society. Carbon, water, nitrogen, and phosphorus flow through this network, moving from older, established trees to younger saplings. It is through this network that a tree can provide support to its neighbors, warn of impending threats, and even influence the growth of other plants. In a way, these forests are like slow-moving cities, buzzing with invisible currents of care and information. Consider a beech tree, centuries old, its trunk thick and gnarled, its bark cracked with age. Researchers have found that when such a tree experiences stress, perhaps from a drought, a sudden insect infestation, or physical damage, it releases chemical signals into the fungal network, which then reach surrounding trees. Nearby saplings receiving these signals may adjust their own growth, produce defensive chemicals, or alter the timing of their leaf production. It is not memory in the way a human remembers a childhood event, but it is memory in another sense. The forest retains an archive of experience, of adversity, and distributes its knowledge where it is most needed.
The trees are, in essence, learning from one another and from the past, across seasons, even decades. This silent form of memory can also extend across generations. Seeds planted in proximity to older, resilient trees are more likely to survive if the parent or grandparent trees have navigated similar environmental stresses. Some studies suggest that trees may prime their seeds chemically, preparing them for the challenges they are likely to face in their environment. In this sense, memory is not a fleeting echo. It is an inheritance carried forward in the cells, the sap, and even in the fungi that surround them. Every tree is both a student and a teacher, participating in a slow, deliberate conversation that spans the lifetime of centuries. If we pause for a moment and imagine ourselves shrinking to the size of a single root tip, we can perceive the forest in an entirely new light. Beneath layers of leaves and undergrowth, the soil teems with life. Nematodes, earthworms, bacteria, and fungi all intermingle in a complex dance. The roots themselves are not passive. They release sugars into the soil, feeding the fungi, which in turn transport nutrients back to the tree, or even to neighboring trees. This symbiotic exchange is delicate and precise. It is a network that has evolved over tens of millions of years, shaped by the quiet pressure of survival and cooperation. To walk on the forest floor without thinking about these hidden processes is to experience only a fraction of the forest's true depth. Yet memory in trees is not only a response to environmental pressures, it is also a record of the relationships they maintain. Older trees, often called mother trees, act as hubs in these subterranean networks. They have the largest, most connected root systems and the most extensive fungal partners. Their presence stabilizes entire forest ecosystems. Seedlings growing under their canopy receive not only shade, but nutrients channeled through this intricate network. They are nourished, guided, and subtly instructed by the memory of what has worked before. It is as if the mother tree carries a living history within her, extending her wisdom outward to every sapling willing to listen.
Philosophically, this challenges our human notions of individuality. We are accustomed to thinking of life as discrete, each organism existing independently. But in the forest, individuality blurs. A grove of trees is better understood as a community, a collective intelligence that acts in ways both defensive and nurturing. The forest remembers not because each tree carries the sum total of knowledge, but because the network, the exchange of resources, chemical signals, and protective strategies preserves continuity across time and space. Memory becomes less about the individual and more about the system as a whole. Take, for example, the trembling aspen forests of North America. These groves are not composed of independent trees at all, but of clonal colonies, genetically identical trunks connected through a shared root system. Some of these colonies have survived for thousands of years, silently enduring fire, drought, and human encroachment. The memories of resilience,
encoded in chemical responses and resource allocation through the shared root system, allow the grove to respond in a coordinated fashion, protecting younger trunks, sealing wounds, and adapting to new stressors. In this way, a single tree is never alone. It carries with it the accumulated experiences of its entire colony. Our modern understanding of these processes has been slow to develop. For centuries, humans assumed trees were passive, largely unthinking entities, reacting only to sunlight and water. But the pioneering work of scientists, such as Suzanne Simard and her colleagues in forest ecology, have revealed a far more intricate picture. Through meticulous experiments using isotopes to trace the movement of carbon and careful mapping of fungal networks, they demonstrated that trees actively share resources, preferentially support kin, and respond to environmental cues communicated by their neighbors. These findings have profound implications not only for ecology, but also for our philosophical understanding of intelligence, memory, and community in the natural world. Perhaps most poetic of all is the idea that the forest remembers us as well. When humans plant, harvest, or clear forests, the trees do not simply passively endure. They respond, adapt, and in some cases even prepare for future encounters with the pressures we introduce. Every cut, every fire, every act of care leaves an imprint, a subtle chemical footprint that may influence the growth of trees decades later.
Organisms and their environment, stretching across generations. The hum of life beneath the forest floor, the silent communication of roots and fungi, the lessons passed down from mother tree to sapling, and the historical memory embedded in clonal colonies all point to a forest that is far more than the sum of its trees. It is a living, breathing archive of knowledge, patience, and resilience. To walk among such trees is to step into a library of the natural world, where the pages rustle not with paper, but with leaves, where the words are chemical, electrical, and microbial, and where time flows not in hours or days, but in seasons and centuries. And so, as we begin this journey into the forest's hidden networks, we are invited to slow our own pace, to listen more deeply, and to consider that memory is not solely a human domain. The trees remember. They remember droughts and floods, insects and disease, fire and frost. They remember who has grown around them and who has fallen. And through their underground networks, they share these memories, silently, patiently, with each other, across generations and across the expanse of the forest. As we step deeper into this subterranean world, imagine the soil beneath your feet not as inert earth, but a living, breathing archive. Each grain is a tiny universe, teeming with bacteria, fungi, and microfauna, all participating in a quiet symphony of life. The roots of trees weave through this complexity, reaching for water, stretching toward nutrients, and connecting with unseen allies. These connections are not random. They are deliberate, sculpted by evolution over millions of years, refined by trial and error in the slow rhythm of nature.
Consider the mycorrhizal fungi, those slender threads that wrap around or pierce the roots of trees. They are both couriers and guardians. Through them, sugars produced by leaves and sunlight travel to distant saplings in shaded clearings, ensuring their survival. Nutrients, too, move through these fungal highways, flowing from areas of abundance to areas of scarcity. In a sense, the forest thinks in patterns of exchange and reciprocity. Older trees act as mentors, younger trees as apprentices, all participating in a network that embodies patience and foresight. Suzanne Simard's groundbreaking research revealed that these networks are not merely mechanical.
Carry preference, almost like memory encoded in chemical language. Trees often favor kin over strangers, allocating resources to offspring or related saplings. It is a form of generosity shaped by millennia of survival, a subtle understanding that the success of one contributes to the persistence of the collective. In the quiet rhythm of the forest, generosity and memory intertwine. A tree remembers its relatives and tends to them not with intention in the human sense, but through evolved mechanisms that reward cooperation and resilience. We can also observe how trees react to danger through these networks. When a tree is attacked by insects, it releases volatile organic compounds. These chemicals are absorbed by the fungal network and transmitted to neighboring trees. In response, these neighbors can preemptively produce toxins, strengthen their leaves, or alter their growth patterns to better withstand the impending threat. This is a forest's way of anticipating the future, of preparing for challenges before they arrive. It is memory expressed as survival strategy, woven into the very physiology of the trees. Let us pause to visualize this. A sprawling forest in early spring. Sunlight dances upon new leaves, glinting like fragments of gold. Beneath, the roots and fungi form a labyrinthine web, stretching out like the threads of a spider's intricate design. A sudden invasion of caterpillars threatens one corner of this web. Almost imperceptibly, the network pulses. Chemical signals flow outward like ripples in a pond. Saplings begin to harden their defenses even before the insects arrive, guided by the silent warnings of their elders. It is a system of foresight, memory, and communal protection, a living archive that is invisible to the casual observer. Beyond defense, these networks carry stories of adaptation. Forests in temperate regions endure freezing winters and scorching summers. Tropical forests face intense rainfall, droughts, and shifting seasons. Trees that survive harsh conditions encode this information chemically and physiologically. When environmental stress occurs, they can transmit this knowledge to their connected neighbors. A sapling growing in the shade may develop leaves more resistant to fungal infections because its parent tree once encountered similar conditions. Memory, in this context, is subtle, layered, and slow, unfolding over seasons rather than moments. Some species take this a step further. Aspen trees, for example, form clonal groves where all trunks share a single root system. These groves can survive for thousands of years. Each trunk, though appearing individual, is part of a living archive that spans centuries. When fire or drought strikes, the shared root network responds collectively, redirecting nutrients and ensuring survival. It is as though the grove remembers its own history,
its past trials and triumphs encoded not in words, but in the flow of water, carbon, and chemical signals. This is memory in a biological sense, extending beyond the lifespan of a single trunk or leaf. Philosophically, these observations challenge our human-centric view of intelligence. We tend to equate memory with thought, reflection, or conscious recollection. But the forest offers a different paradigm. Memory here is distributed, systemic, and adaptive. It exists not within the confines of a brain, but within the interactions of thousands of organisms over space and time. Trees remember by interacting, by sharing resources, by responding to signals and altering their growth accordingly. Memory is a process, a pattern, a flow. Even more fascinating is the temporal scale of this memory. Trees operate on timelines vastly longer than our own. A 100-year-old oak has witnessed generations of animals, human settlements, storms, and subtle changes in climate. Its chemical signals, its stored nutrients, and the fungal connections it maintains carry echoes of these experiences. When we walk past such a tree, we are touching a living chronicle of history, a slow-moving memoir written in sap, wood, and soil. This slow unfolding of memory is mirrored in their reproduction. Trees do not rush, they plan, in a sense, for decades to come. Seedlings growing under the canopy of mature trees inherit not only light and shade, but also biochemical preparedness. The chemical cues from parent trees prime these seedlings to withstand pests, drought, and competition. Even when the parent tree dies, its legacy continues through the network, ensuring that lessons learned in hardship persist into the next generation. Memory, it seems, is as much about guidance and inheritance as it is about survival.
Memory is mutual. Trees and fungi co-create a living archive of experience. In a broader ecological context, these hidden networks stabilize entire ecosystems. They regulate nutrient cycles, buffer against environmental extremes, and maintain biodiversity. Without these silent conversations beneath our feet, forests would be fragile, disjointed, and far less resilient. Memory here is ecological as well as biological. The collective recollection of what works, what survives, and what sustains life. Every fallen leaf, every decomposed root, every seasonal bloom is recorded in this shared ledger, informing the next chapter of forest life. And yet there is still mystery. While scientists have mapped certain networks and traced carbon flows, much of the forest's memory remains opaque. What do trees sense about their neighbors? How do they choose whom to support or whom to compete against? The chemical language of the forest is intricate, multi-layered, and subtle, and human understanding only scratches the surface. Each study opens new questions, new marvels, new glimpses into the wisdom that forests have carried for millions of years. We can take comfort in the pace of this memory. Unlike human systems that often demand immediacy, trees act on a scale of patience. They teach us that memory need not be urgent, that wisdom can be slow, persistent, and resilient. In a world rushing toward instantaneous communication and instant gratification, the forest reminds us of the value of quiet continuity, of enduring networks, of lessons that unfold across decades and centuries. Tonight,
As we drift deeper into this exploration, it is worth imagining ourselves lying under a canopy of ancient trees, listening to the soft rustle of leaves above. We may not hear words, but we can feel a presence. The memory of countless lives intertwined, the history of survival and adaptation encoded in the soil beneath us. Each breath we take carries the scent of history, of resilience, and of connections that reach far beyond the visible. The forest is alive with memory, and in its quiet persistence, it invites us to pause, to reflect, and to learn from a rhythm that has endured far longer than any human lifetime. As we venture further into the forest's subtle symphony, it is worth considering the remarkable ways in which trees store and retrieve memory over time. Memory in humans is often tied to rapid thought, recollection, and conscious reflection. In the forest, memory is slower, layered, and distributed, encoded not in a single organ, but across root systems, fungal networks, leaves, and even the chemical composition of the soil itself. A tree does not think in words, but it remembers experiences through changes in its physiology and the chemical signals it sends and receives. Take, for instance, the seasonal patterns of leafing and flowering. Trees that have endured repeated cycles of drought or late frost may alter the timing of bud formation and leaf unfolding. These changes are guided not only by immediate environmental cues, but also by physiological memory, an archive of past experiences imprinted into the cells, sap flow, and energy storage of the tree. A maple in a temperate forest may unfurl its first leaves weeks earlier or later than its neighbor, based on the memory of previous years' temperatures, rainfall, and sunlight. In this way, the forest is not just responding to the present, it is acting in harmony with a past it carries quietly within. The elegance of this system becomes even more apparent when we examine the interconnections between different species. While we often think of forests as a collection of individual species coexisting, they are, in reality, a meshwork of relationships and shared histories. Oaks may provide shelter and nutrients to birches. Pines may exchange chemical signals with hazels. Fungi act as intermediaries, ensuring that these exchanges are not chaotic, but directed in ways that maximize the survival of the ecosystem. Here, memory becomes a kind of communal intelligence, a distributed awareness that arises not from a single tree, but from the entire forest acting in concert. One of the most extraordinary aspects of these networks is how they mediate conflict and cooperation simultaneously. Trees must compete for sunlight, water, and space, yet they also support one another through resource sharing. Mother trees, in particular, are central to this delicate balance. Their roots are older, deeper, and more intricately linked to the fungal networks that permeate the forest. Through these connections, they can direct nutrients toward weaker saplings or toward genetically related offspring, subtly influencing which trees thrive and which fade. It is a form of memory that guides action, a strategic archive written in the language of nutrients and chemicals.
For this narration, read the script in a calm, gentle, and soothing voice, as if guiding the listener through a quiet, ancient forest. Speak slowly, with deliberate pacing, allowing each sentence to flow naturally into the next, pausing subtly at commas,
periods and between paragraphs to give the listener time to absorb imagery. Emphasize sensory details like the rustle of leaves, the soft smell of earth, and the intricate networks of roots and fungi beneath the forest floor, making these elements feel vivid and alive. Use warmth and subtle wonder when describing interactions between trees, mother trees and saplings, or chemical signals traveling through mycorrhizal networks, creating a sense of awe without exaggeration. Highlight key words gently: roots, memory, network, sapling, patience, resilience, but avoid a dramatic or forceful tone, keeping the narration meditative and immersive. When introducing scientific terms like mycorrhizal, ectomycorrhizal, or clonal colony, pronounce them clearly and slowly, allowing a brief pause afterward so listeners can register and reflect. In reflective or philosophical sections, slow the pace slightly more and lower your tone to invite contemplation, letting the listener drift alongside the narrative. Treat the narration as a continuous stream, never abrupt, flowing like a river of knowledge and imagery, blending gentle explanation of scientific facts with poetic metaphors. Imagine the listener lying beneath the canopy of an ancient forest, experiencing the forest's quiet intelligence, and guide them with a tone of reverent curiosity, soft awe, and meditative calm. Throughout, maintain subtle continuity, with each sentence and paragraph bridging to the next, preserving the immersive, slow, and relaxing atmosphere that defines the style of a one-hour documentary narration. To visualize this, imagine a sprawling oak forest after a harsh summer. The soil is dry, cracks spiderweb across its surface, and young saplings struggle to survive in the intense heat. Beneath the surface, an unseen conversation is underway. Fungal filaments pulse with energy. Carbon flows from the older oaks to the smaller trees, and chemical signals alert them to impending water stress. The saplings, guided by these silent messages, slow their growth, conserve resources, and adjust leaf formation to minimize water loss. What appears externally as mere adaptation is, in fact, a deeply orchestrated response informed by memory encoded in the ecosystem itself. Historical perspectives on forests also illuminate how long memory can persist. Indigenous peoples around the world have long recognized the intelligence of forests and the continuity of life within them. In North America, Native American oral traditions speak of grandmother trees, guardians whose roots and wisdom extend through generations. In Europe, foresters historically noted that certain trees thrived in areas once cleared or burned decades earlier, observing a resilience that seemed almost sentient. Modern science has only begun to confirm what these communities intuited for centuries, that forests possess a continuity of knowledge, an ability to remember, adapt, and share across generations. Even when catastrophe strikes, memory endures. Fires, storms,
pest outbreaks, and human interference all leave chemical and structural marks on trees and their networks. Some trees respond by producing seeds that are more resilient to fire, while others alter the timing of growth cycles to avoid repeated harm. In the Amazon, studies have shown that trees which survive droughts can influence the tolerance of neighboring trees through the underground fungal network, creating pockets of resilience that span kilometers. Memory here is not passive. It is protective, anticipatory, and inherently communal. Let us now consider the role of communication in this memory. Trees employ an array of chemical signals, some airborne, some transmitted through roots and fungi. These chemicals can warn of herbivores, attract protective insects, or stimulate the production of defensive compounds in neighbors. The sophistication of these signals rivals any human-designed warning system, yet it operates quietly, invisibly, and without haste. A forest attacked by leaf-chewing insects does not panic. It organizes, anticipates, and reinforces itself, guided by a shared understanding born of memory and experience.
A particularly enchanting example comes from studies of acacia trees in African savannas. When giraffes feed on their leaves, acacias release chemicals that are absorbed by nearby trees, which then preemptively produce toxins to deter herbivores. The trees are not conscious in the human sense, yet they remember the presence of a threat and act collectively to mitigate it. This memory is emergent, arising from the interactions between multiple organisms, trees, fungi, insects, and even large herbivores, all woven together into a resilient network that persists over time. The philosophical implications of this are profound. Memory need not be confined to brains, neurons, or consciousness. It can exist as a distributed phenomenon, embedded in networks of organisms, expressed through chemical gradients, resource flows, and the subtle modulation of growth. The forest teaches us patience and perspective. It reminds us that life is not solely about instantaneous reactions, but about continuity, adaptation, and the quiet passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. The trees, in their patient wisdom, have been recording history long before we arrived and will continue long after we are gone. As we imagine ourselves walking slowly through such a forest, perhaps in early dawn when mist curls around tree trunks, we begin to notice the subtle patterns of life. Moss grows more thickly in areas where nutrients flow most freely. Seedlings cluster where chemical signals are strongest, and fallen logs serve as repositories of water, fungi, and life for those yet to grow. Every interaction, every chemical pulse, every resource transfer carries the echo of past events. The forest is a library, but its pages are living, and its memory is dynamic, constantly being updated, expanded, and reshaped by both internal and external forces. Even human interaction with forests leaves a mark. Planting, harvesting, or clearing modifies nutrient flows and can alter the chemical memory that guides tree behavior. In managed forests,
Careful observation of these networks can inform practices that enhance resilience, conserve biodiversity, and maintain ecological memory. Conversely, indiscriminate logging or environmental degradation can sever networks, erasing knowledge encoded over decades or centuries. In this sense, humans are not merely observers. We are participants, capable of influencing memory, continuity, and survival in ways both subtle and profound. The forest invites us to consider the nature of time itself. While our lives unfold in hours, days, and years, forests operate on centuries. A single tree may live for hundreds of years, a root system may survive for millennia, and fungal networks may span generations. Memory, therefore, becomes a temporal bridge, a mechanism that connects past and future, allowing the forest to anticipate challenges, adapt to change, and persist in a manner that transcends individual lifespans. It is a meditation on patience, resilience, and the continuity of life. And as night descends, as shadows lengthen, and the forest hums softly with nocturnal life, it is worth pausing to reflect on the quiet complexity beneath our feet. Every root, every fungal filament, every chemical signal is part of a story that has been unfolding long before human eyes arrived and will continue long after we are gone. In the silence, memory endures. It endures not in loud proclamations, but in the gentle, persistent rhythms of life, in the patient orchestration of survival, in the communal intelligence of an entire forest.